You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It is no longer good for anything but is thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. People do not light a lamp and put it under the bushel basket. Rather, they put it on the lampstand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven.
It works now. So it goes. That's fine. I want to introduce you today to my good friend, the patron saint of Too-Muchness. That's not her official patronage. She was only officially made a saint in 2012. A little overdue, but so it goes. She was officially made a doctor of the church, however. She wasn't just canonized as your run-of-the-mill saint. She's called a doctor of the church. That's a distinction given only to a handful of dead Christians who have made remarkable contributions to Christian theology. But for our purposes, she's the patron saint of Too-Muchness. Has anybody here ever been told that they are too much? Ah, yes. I see some hands, I see some nods. That you were too high maintenance, too opinionated, too loud, too happy, too sad, too dramatic, too excited, too smart, too into something niche and weird. Has anyone ever told you to be smaller, to take up less space, to reduce yourself so that others are not intimidated by your presence? I'm sure you have. And I want to take a moment here at the beginning of this talk and invite you to find that place in yourself, that place of hurt, that place of smallness, that place where somebody forced you into something that you're not. And to not feel embarrassed about that, but to hold it lightly, to hold it gingerly, and to pray for healing today. And while you do, I want to tell you the story of Hildegard of Bingen, a woman who spent the first half of her life literally locked away in a room attached to a church, praying silently and holding her true self inside, who then spent the second half of her life writing over 400 letters, 77 pieces of sacred music, including the earliest known opera by 300 years, 3 books of theology totaling over 1,200 pages, a 9-book encyclopedia of natural sciences, which was still used up until a couple hundred years ago, an advanced medical textbook, which includes the first scientific descriptions of female sexuality, menstruation, and menopause. She invented an entirely new language with a different alphabet and grammar and a 1,000-word vocabulary, seemingly just for fun, Tolkien style. She founded 2 monasteries for women, which she personally designed with indoor plumbing and sanitation that was centuries ahead of its time. She conducted 4 major preaching tours throughout the Holy Roman Empire in her 60s and 70s, despite having no official position of authority. And if you have ever enjoyed hops in your beer, experienced musical therapy, or colored a mandala, you likely can thank Hildegard in part for that. She's the reason why beer doesn't spoil, by the way. You're welcome. Thank you, Hildegard. But before she was perhaps the most interesting person of the medieval period, she was the runt of her family, the 10th born child of an upper crust family, born in the Rhine Valley of modern-day Germany in 1098. So from an early age, Hildegard was weird, unique, special. She had visions. She had an imagination like every kid had, but her visions were very specific. At 3 years old, she had a vision of her parents' pregnant cow, and she said exactly what that baby calf's markings were going to look like when it was born. And when that calf was born and the markings were identical, her family said, "Never talk about this again. You might be a witch, and we don't want people taking you away." But she was 3 years old. 3-year-olds don't listen to their parents. Most kids don't listen to their parents. And she would tell people. She would tell kids around her. She would tell her priests at the church. And every time she told somebody about her visions, they would tell her the same thing. This is not normal. Don't talk about this. To Hildegard, she assumed that everyone had a vibrant spiritual life and that God spoke directly to everyone in vivid, incredible visions that opened up the cosmos and exposed the inner workings of things. She just thought that was normal spirituality that apparently even the priests didn't have. So she realized early on, if she was going to make it in the world, she had to keep all of that inside, not share it with a single soul. So as a little girl who was already a bit too much and with 9 other siblings to take care of, her parents tithed her to the church. Yes, that's right. That was a common practice among upper families. Your 10th child was a gift to the church. So as an 8-year-old, she was given away to the local church to spend her entire life locked in a cell attached to the side of the church, praying for her family's good fortune and God's favor on them. Which she did, locked away with a woman 5 years her elder. She spent the first 40 years of her life in this religious situation, spending all day praying and reading scripture and talking with this other nun and doing that, keeping everything deeply locked inside. In our reading today, Jesus said that you are the light of the world. And when a person lights a light in their home, they don't put a bushel basket on top of it. That would be ridiculous. What's the point of having a light if you cover it? No, they take that light and they put it on a lampstand for everybody to see. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden, nor should it be hidden. But Hildegard hid her light. She hid the flame. And like the prophet Jeremiah said that those words that God sent to him, they lived inside of him like a flame eating away at his bones, and he was weary from holding them. And she too grew weary from holding them. It physically affected her. Holding in those revelations from God physically hurt her. It caused her to lose weight. It caused her stress, anxiety, what we would now call, heart problems from increased anxiety. She was sickly and unwell from holding in the fire that ate away at her bones. Until one day, at 42 years old, she received a vision stronger and more vivid than any she'd had before. She said, quote, "The heavens were opened up, and a blinding light of exceptional brilliance flowed through my entire brain. And so it kindled my whole heart and breast like a flame, not burning, but warming." And that light to her illuminated the universe in a way that was unique to Hildegard, in that she suddenly understood great spiritual mysteries, but also understood great scientific mysteries. She saw the world, the natural world, the spiritual world, the mental world as one continuous thing. And she understood it at a deep and fundamental, interconnected level. And it was like all of her studies had finally come together, and all the pieces came together. And she heard a voice from heaven say, "Cry out, therefore, and write." And she said, "No." Because she'd spent 42 years being told no. You keep that inside. That scares people. That is too much for people. Normal people cannot take the entire weight of the universe on them. You need to keep that inside, little lady. But the voice kept coming night after night after night. Write this down. And it would not go away, and her health continued to deteriorate because of it. Until one day, her confessor said, "Hildegard, you got to do what it says. Just start writing." And she started writing what would become her first book, which took a decade to finish, called Scivias. And her symptoms vanished. And her health returned tenfold. Her energy was through the roof. She was a new woman. When she removed the bushel from her inner light, it burst forth like a supernova in every single direction. Everything in the universe fascinated Hildegard, and there was nothing that she could not do if she put her mind to it. She wanted to know about the movement of the stars and the migrations of birds. She wanted to study the way that humans thought and felt and the way that God moved in us. When she received clarity on a topic through a vision, like I said earlier, it didn't just come out as words. It came out as art and poetry and music and play and drama and all of these things together. She knew that knowledge itself was multifaceted, so she would work with a dozen artists and scribes at the same time, dictating to a team of them. Like this right now, the top left, there's 3 angels, and one of them has one gold wing and one silver wing, and that represents this, 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 this. Are you getting this down? Because, okay, in the top left, there's a seraphim, and the seraphim is holding a shepherd's crook, and the shepherd's crook symbolizes length. And hold on, I'm getting a melody in my head right now. It goes, ah. Okay, somebody write that down. Okay, now you, over here. And this is happening all the time with Hildegard. This is why she writes 77 pieces of sacred music, including the very first opera. Oh, which, by the way, I didn't mention this earlier. She also handled the costumes and set design because she made clothing, and she was a painter and an artist as well. And the staging and every part of it, there's nothing that Hildegard didn't want to get her hands on. And her music, by the way, I've been listening to it for the past few days. You should as well. It wasn't boring and monotonous like the Gregorian chants of the day that the men were singing in the monasteries. She was playing with these musical intervals that would jump and then float down in ways that nobody was doing in those days. She wrote one time in one of her poems that she was like a feather floating on the breath of God. And I feel like that describes, if you're not going to look this up later, imagine a single voice that is a feather floating on the breath of God. That's Hildegard's music. That's Hildegard's soul. And as she let her light shine and she stopped letting people tell her that she was too much, word began to spread of her, and people flocked to the monastery. Women wanted to join her. They wanted to learn from somebody that brilliant who would empower them to let their light shine as well. But there was a problem. You see, in those days, when men joined a monastery, they just joined a monastery, and they worked for their keep. When women joined a monastery, they would give their dowry to the monastery. That chunk of change that you're supposed to give to your husband to start your family with. They weren't going to get married after all. They had to do something with it, so it would go to the monastery. So many monasteries for men had a women's section that was essentially a money-making venture to get dowries given to them so they could afford their monasteries. And so all of these women were coming and giving their dowries to the monastery, and the men were in control of the funds and all of the things that they could do. And Hildegard said, no, I want a space for women, where we can be free from male control We can be free to speak. We can be free to create, to follow whatever that light is shining within us without a man telling us we are not allowed to. And they told her no, because she was making them a lot of money. And I'll spare you the details. She got her convent. She got it by outmaneuvering and outwitting the men in charge, and by just generally being insistent and brilliant, because that's how she did everything. So she didn't just found this monastery, by the way. She designed it. Did I mention she was also into architecture and design? Yeah. Since she was one of the most brilliant minds scientifically of her day, she knew hundreds of years before germ theory was a thing that cleanliness and sanitation were vital for health. So she designed an internal plumbing system into her monastery with complex sanitation networks and waste disposal systems centuries before anybody else was doing this. This is the early 1100s. Okay, the White House didn't even have indoor plumbing until the early 1900s. So this means that while people were dying all over the place of infection, people were getting better in her monastery. And they thrived there. Because God gave her a mind that saw the world holistically as one circular mandala. She knew that illness was physical, but also mental and spiritual. So she essentially invented psychosomatic treatment. Like if a person came to her monastery complaining of what we'd now call ulcers, she had medicinal treatments for it. Which, by the way, this is a side note, during World War II, when medicine was scarce in Germany, some people pulled out her book of ailments and cures and started trying to find natural remedies for things because they couldn't get prescription medications during the war, and found that, my goodness, a lot of these actually work really well. And she was onto something with her scientific studies. There is a whole branch of medicine in Germany now called Hildegardian medicine. It's essentially herbal remedies that really work. So she might treat your ulcers medicinally, but she might also do a sort of pre-Freudian form of talk therapy to find out what ails your spirit. She would introduce music as a means of calming your spirit and lowering your anxiety. She didn't know about cortisol levels yet or anxiety, but she knew intuitively that human beings are not just brains, they're not just bodies, that we are more than that everything is connected, everything belongs, everything matters. From the smallest ache to the largest system, everything is connected. So she taught her sisters, and she tended the elements of the locals. She studied the local flowers and pondered the cosmos itself. And one time she wrote a letter to Emperor Barbarossa calling him a petulant child and a madman, and warned him that if he didn't start acting his age, God was going to kill him. So that's a thing. She told the Pope to his face that he was a coward. And she simply did not care what people thought of her, especially the men in charge of her day and time. She knew that she wasn't just smarter than them, that she had a word from God that needed to be spoken. And their puny little earthly authority did not matter when the creator of the universe has a message for you to share. She knew that she was called to live her life out loud. And so she did. And there were times in those final half of her life that she got scared and she didn't share, that she put the light back under the bushel. And every time she did, God made her sick, physically ill, as a reminder, physically, that we are connected spiritually and physically, and you have a message to share, Hildegard, and I'm not going to let you get away with it. The world needs you. And I think my favorite Hildegard story comes in the final year of her life. Hildegard is 81 years old at this point. There are 2 monasteries that she has started. She has, at this point, written thousands of pages in science and theology. She has constructed just an unimaginably rich life. And she's caring for a local man who is sick. And unfortunately, despite her best efforts, he doesn't make it, and he dies. And so, with the help of the local priest, they held a funeral mass, and they buried him on the grounds. And a few days later, an emissary from the archbishop, bigwig, the guy with the big funny hat, came and said, "We need to know where that man has been buried because we need to take his body away. He is a rebel who rebelled against the emperor, and the Pope has excommunicated him, and he is therefore not allowed to be buried on sacred grounds. He must be taken out and thrown in the dump." Hildegard said, "I need to talk to my boss about this," and went and prayed. And God told her in no uncertain terms, "No. That is my child buried in that graveyard, and you will do no such thing." So she got up, she went to the cemetery, she found where he was buried, and she hid all evidence. She removed his headstone, she put leaves around it so you wouldn't see the disturbed dirt. She made it impossible for the authorities to find where this man was buried. And she went back to the emissary, the archbishop, and she said, "Look, yeah, this man was excommunicated. Yeah, he made some mistakes, but he repented. He asked for forgiveness in his final hours, and he was granted forgiveness by God. He was given the last rites by the priest. He is right in the eyes of God, so your puny authority has no power here. You are not greater than God. I'm sorry." See, the emissary went back to the archbishop, and the archbishop was mad because this rebellious little old lady was refusing to listen to his big manly authority. So he essentially excommunicated the entire convent. It's called an interdiction. It means that you are no longer allowed to take communion or practice the sacraments in that space. And they were no longer allowed to sing the services, the special sacred hymns, most of which Hildegard had written herself, was no longer allowed to sing or take Holy Communion in that space. And Hildegard, 81 years old, who had been dedicated to the church since she was 8 years old, who had been getting visions directly from God since before she knew what language really was told by an archbishop she could no longer sing to God or take Holy Communion. So she wrote a wonderful letter. There is an art, by the way, to writing respectful letters that are irrespectful. You know what I mean? Like the hugs and kisses, get out of my face kind of letters. This one is pure art. She wrote in this letter, basically saying at the end that anyone who refuses to allow someone to sing God's praises on earth will, after death, find themselves in a place where there is no music, which is the nicest way anyone has ever told an archbishop to go to hell. Shortly thereafter, the interdiction was lifted, and the music came louder than before. And Hildegard died later that year at age 81. She lived the first half of her life in a cell, hiding her light. And she lived the second half in public, letting it shine as brilliantly as it would, and the world is a better place because of it. Friends, I wonder how many of you have hid your light because it was too bright for some weak fool to handle. That you were made to feel like you were too much, so you made yourself smaller. Friends, I want to tell you that that is not of God. You have been given a light and a divine commandment to let it shine. And yeah, it's so vulnerable to do that. to let your true self be known that way, especially when you've been told to hide it. It's so easy to get hurt when you're vulnerable and open and presenting your true self out there, but the alternative is withering away from the inside. So today, I want you to take that part of yourself that has been made to be small and be true to that. Be true to yourself. Be true to your calling. Be true to who God has made you to be. Follow the truth that God has placed within you, and do not let anyone tell you that you are too much. And I wonder, we have a few minutes, if there's anything stirring up within you that you would like to share with the rest